Everybody. Welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. My name is Chris Enriquez. You can follow me at Chris Enriquez Drums. I'm from Revolver Magazine, which you can find at Revolver Mag, and I'm also in the band Spotlights at Spotlights Music. That's who I am. Thanks for supporting the show. Shout out to my co-host, David Castillo, who you can follow at Confines World. He did a great interview that was featured in Polestar just yesterday, talking about booking, raising money during the quarantine to keep St. Vitus alive. And shout out to 2 Minutes to Late Night. We did a great cover of Killing in the Name of by Rage Against the Machine at a great time, and it's been getting a lot of amazing attention. So shout out to everybody that partook in that. Anyway, I'm here today to talk about one of my favorite bands. Anyone that knows me knows that I love Revelation Records, the hardcore scene, the post-hardcore scene, the emo bands, all of it. And I was on the label as well. I saw a band called Sensefield from California, who hopefully all of you know, because they are just one of those bands that should have been as big, if not bigger, than a lot of the alternative rock bands in the 90s. I saw them in about 96, 97 with Texas is the Reason. I went to go see Texas is the Reason. Sensefield was headlining. It was at Wetlands. They absolutely fucking blew my mind. Jonathan Bunch, his vocals are just unbelievable. They're perfect in every sense. I became a lifelong fan after that. The riffs, all of it. Building was the first record that I got. I still listen to it to this day. All of the records are timeless. It still holds up. And I'm really excited because I get to speak with their guitar player, Chris Evenson, who is going to be joining us for the next hour. And if you have any questions for him, you can go on the question mark box on the bottom of the screen and submit your questions. I'll do my best to get to the comments, but that's the easiest way. So anyway, I am going to see if Chris is ready to join me here on the screen. And it looks like he's watching from the Sensefield's account. So, oops. There we go. Let's see if the internet can work its magic. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good, good, good. Thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking me.
Hey, no problem, man. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I don't know if you heard my intro, but I've been a fan of Sensefield for I don't want to make you feel old, but I got into Sensefield when I was about 16 years old. I'm gonna be 40 this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Been a while, but lifelong fan, and this should be cool, man. How have you been doing throughout this crazy time?
I mean, fine, all things considered. I don't have a whole lot to complain about, but I mean, I'm definitely over being cooped up.
For sure. Yeah.
Inside for I completely lost track of time or what day it is or anything like that. And especially now, it's really hot here, and it makes it even kind of worse just to be sitting inside.
Right.
You know.
And you're in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Okay. What, if you don't mind me asking, what are you doing professionally these days?
I work as a controller, like accounting and finance stuff. Work for like a company that does like movie and TV lighting.
Oh wow!
Stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Not a lot of great stories that go along with accounting, but
Hey, you know what? I hope you're able to get through, professionally during this time, though. And, that's why I always ask people what they're doing, It's just kind of interesting to find out how people are surviving,
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't really suffered much in that way at all. So, knock on wood. But,
yeah.
It's been okay. I know it's been pretty brutal for a lot of people.
Well, this is a time that we usually like to go back and, I always start by seeing how people are doing now. But, if we're going to talk about life stories, this is the time to do it. So if that's cool with you, I'm going to kind of take you back on a journey to your beginnings and kind of try to get through as much of your life as we can in an hour.
All right. Well, I hope I can. I hope my memory serves, because I did a kind of an interview for a South Bay punk book recently, and I realized doing that my memory is just terrible when it comes to this stuff. But I'll do my best.
Well, when do you remember music kind of being a significant part of your life? Meaning, it could have been when you were single digit and you heard a song, like, before you were in bands. What's your earliest memory of music?
Yeah, I didn't have much interest in music for like the first part of my life. I had older brothers and sisters, and I never really felt a part of their music. It wasn't, and this is going to date me and make me really old, but it wasn't until I discovered like new wave and the B-52s and Devo and Adam Ants and those bands. That's what sparked my interest in music. That felt new, and it felt like it was mine, and not my siblings, or and so that was kind of the gateway thing, and that led me to punk rock. Like in freshman year of high school is kind of when I started getting into that stuff, and I discovered the Adolescents and Black Flag and Bad Religion and all these bands that were happening in LA at the time. This is the early 80s, like 81, 82 time frame. And that kind of was what started it all. And it's kind of been a love affair that's never really gone away. I mean, I still spend too much money on records and shit like that.
I mean, that's stuff that sticks with you. I think that you mentioned the punk rock music in the 80s, and also honestly, like the new wave scene, there was a connection there because a lot of that was post-punk, I guess you could even say. Yeah. But the thing about punk rock music, I think that is obvious to many of us, and we're going to go through all this because there was the Sensefield tribute to Jonathan Bunch, and you had all your friends and bands and people from throughout your life. There's something about the punk rock community that's like, it's not just music, and it becomes this lifelong thing, which is what's so special about it, I think.
Yeah, no, once you get into that world, it's kind of owns you, the rest of your life in a way. I mean, that's the thing, is you think when you're younger, I couldn't imagine myself, first of all, being older at all, but then I never thought I would be older and still basically the same person listening to the same music.
Right.
It's kind of weird, but it's cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, it keeps you youthful, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you mentioned the punk bands that you got into, that's like first wave stuff. Were you around seeing Black Flag in the initial lineup and that kind of stuff?
I saw Black Flag with Rollins. I didn't see them with any of their three previous singers. I mean, I was maybe 14 when I went to my first show, and I had an amazing first show, and it was pretty memorable. I went like in the early 1982. I saw Bad Brains.
Oh, I think that we got a freeze frame on you. Oh, there you are. You mentioned Bad Brains.
Yeah, sorry, my phone through that. Yeah, so my first show was at Bad Brains. It was their first time out to LA on that Roar cassette. I don't know if you're familiar.
Oh, of course. No, I have a Bad Brains tattoo.
prime hardcore era. And that was my, I'm like a sheltered kid from like suburbia, and I'm, suddenly like in the really seedy part of Hollywood, seeing like all these grown-up kids that were like scary as hell. And that really made an impression, but at the same time, it was so exciting, and kind of got me hooked. So I'm spoiled because my first show was like an insane kind of legendary show.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, that's prime. That's at their peak, or
Yeah, it was their peak of hardcore-ness. Before they kind of went a little more.
So as far as your musicianship and picking up guitar, when and how did that happen?
Well, I was initially a drummer. I wanted to play drums, and so I played drums for a few years, like in high school. I was in a bunch of bands that didn't do much of anything other than just practice in the garage, and would get get drunk at night and practice and do stuff like that. But we never even played parties, let alone shows. So that kind of went on for years, and then suddenly I just decided I wanted to be able to write the songs because I was into the music. So I would pick up a guitar at band practice, pick up our guitarist's guitar and just start learning like rudimentary bar chords and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started. So it was like I never had any kind of formal training. It was just watching other people play and then trying to emulate it.
And was this band that you were playing drums in? Was that Reason to Believe?
No, I didn't play. That's the first band I played guitar in. That was my first band where like I wrote music. I had a band called Dissonance. That was my first band in high school.
Okay.
I was in a band called Persistence, which was a like positive hardcore band. I was in a band called Active Response, which was another posy hardcore band.
It's a great name.
Yeah, I was in a band called Hippie Temptation for like 5 minutes, which was kind of like a burnout punk band of like ex-punk people that were into punk, got into the Grateful Dead, and then got back into punk. It was like a weird trajectory where I grew up. So a lot of random stuff like that. And then I finally started playing guitar, and that's when I did a recording of Reason to Believe. I had these songs, and I wanted to do a demo, so I did a recording where I played the drums, bass, and guitar. And so I did the music, and then I had to find a singer. And that's how I came upon John. John was a friend and a guy I hung out with, and nobody would let him sing in their bands because he was such kind of an obnoxious little shit back then, and partied too hard and didn't care about much. But he could hold a note, which is more than most of us could do, and he had all the right influences. He liked a lot of the bands I liked, and like kind of the more melodic side of punk and hardcore. And so I asked him to do it, and that was his first time ever singing on something, and he sang like on this old demo we did.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we went around. We sold that demo we got it into some record stores and sold a few copies. It's not very good, but it's the first thing we ever did.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of John back in the day, kind of like, I don't know if they were high school pictures, but like he was totally punk rock in the old photos that I saw.
Yeah, he kind of grew his hair out. He had dreadlocks for like a long time during that period, and like shaved head. It's like, yeah, that was kind of his look at that point. Yeah.
You met him in high school?
Yeah, he was a couple years younger than me. I was just finishing high school, and he was kind of a friend of a friend. He used to hang out when I would play in these other bands. We used to practice. All these bands would practice in this garage in a town called Harbor City, which is in like South Bay of Los Angeles. And he used to just hang out and drink beer while we played. And
what were the you mentioned like that you guys had some melodic punk bands in common that you agreed on. What were some of those bands that you were kind of influenced by at that time?
Yeah, he liked. We both liked a band called Scream.
Oh yeah, I know those. I know Pete.
Yeah, love Scream a lot. We both liked them a lot. He liked 7 Seconds a lot. I like 7 Seconds too.
Hell yeah.
So stuff like that. That was kind of that. It was fast, but it had some like melodies to it. We both kind of, we both loved the Dickies and stuff. And so we would kind of try to infuse some of that into kind of a more hardcore sound.
Right.
When we recorded our 12-inch, the album, we'd both been listening to a lot of Dickies. We worked for a summer as janitors together, and to raise money to go on our first and only Reason to Believe tour. And we were listening to a lot of that at that point when we were writing those songs and stuff.
I love that because, what Sensefield became, a lot of people may not have known the roots. If you're not in the scene and you hear, especially, well, any of the Sensefield stuff really, but especially the later stuff, you'd never go back and think to yourself, oh, they came from this scene. Kind of like the Goo Goo Dolls. Their first record was totally punk, you know?
Yeah, we actually, on our first tour, the One Reason to Believe tour, we happened to be in town the same night somewhere in Texas when the Goo Goo Dolls were playing. And this was during that, when they were like a kind of a punk band. And we like squeezed our way onto their bill opening for them. We had like a free night, and we're like, yeah, because we'd been liking that record too, that first record of theirs. I can't remember what it's called. And so we like, begged our way onto their show and played with them somewhere in Texas. Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And that's cool. I can hear a little of that Kevin Seconds in Jonathan's voice a little bit from what I used to.
Definitely. I mean, he was way into 7 Seconds at that point.
Yeah.
No.
Our
influences to me seem pretty blatant when I listen to that old band. Like, I could tell exactly what I was listening to. A lot of Battalion of Saints and Minor Threat and stuff like that.
What was so how did Sensefield kind of like come out of that?
Well, Sensefield, Reason to Believe had a very kind of turbulent lineup. It was always me and John, but then we had a bunch of different drummers and a bunch of bass players. And we had settled on a good lineup when we did the album, like the 12-inch. But the drummer, who was an amazing drummer, like one of the best drummers I've ever definitely played with, let alone heard.
Yeah.
He was kind of, but I don't want to disparage him, but he was kind of an idiot. I mean, he just was like, he was a younger kid, and he just was, there was no way that we could take him on tour. We just knew that it would never happen. So we had to search for a drummer, and we were in the lurch because the tour was going out, and we had to get somebody. So Rodney Sellers, who had originally been in Reason to Believe, but had gone off to art school in San Francisco, agreed to come back and play drums again for us. And then we got, our bass player didn't want to go either. so nobody wanted to go on tour. So we got an old friend of mine from high school, this guy John Stockberger, who was a old punk rock guy that I was friends with in high school. Kind of reconnected with him. He joined the band. We went out on this tour, and when we got back, the two of them wanted to continue to play, and so we just kept going. Rodney, though, was a guitar player mainly. I mean, he was a drummer, but he played guitar and he wrote a lot of songs. And he had a lot of interesting songs that we really liked, but that just did not fit that hardcore mold. And I always got bugged when bands would when bands would drastically alter their sound throughout their, like you'd start off as a hardcore band, and then by the end it was like U2 or something. And that was happening a lot in that like late 80s period, like where everybody was like, punk kind of died, and then everybody was like trying to be like a whatever, some kind of more rock band.
U2 thing or a metal band.
Or everybody, other people went speed metal at that time. So we decided, like, let's not do that. Let's not be that band. Let's start something on the side. We'll call it something else. We'll come up with a name at some point. So we did that. We started playing Rodney songs. That was kind of the impetus for Sensefield. I had a few. Rodney had a bunch. Rodney was a very prolific songwriter, and super prolific. And so we got into that stuff. And for a while, we were doing both, and we were still playing shows as Reason to Believe, as we were doing that other stuff. And then eventually, we just decided that we kind of liked doing Sensefield stuff more. And hardcore wasn't what it was by then anyway, but wasn't what it had been anyways.
It's like the late 80s at this point.
Yeah, this is the late 80s. This is like 89ish.
Okay.
That was kind of like Reason to Believe was only around a couple of years, but so by like 90, 91, we were kind of fully, I think, doing Sensefield.
I was gonna ask, before we get into the first album and all that stuff, you mentioned how Rodney was a prolific songwriter, which is obvious to any Sensefield fan because the guy is just unbelievable and his voice is great. What was the creative? Well, everybody in the band was, by the way. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I mean, the bass playing. You guys were the only melodic band of that nature. I'm just kind of fanning out here. That had a 5-string bass player that actually pulled it off without coming off cheesy, in my opinion.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, the 5-string bass. That was like all new. I was like, wow, listen to that low B string. That's cool. You know.
Yeah. What was the process, the creative process, like typically?
A lot of times, Rodney would. This is where there was like a little bit of like creative tension in the band. Is that Rodney would write? He wrote fully fleshed out songs. I mean, he wrote the music, lyrics, and the vocal and melodies, and he would bring those to us. And a lot of times we would do them fully. Like there's a lot of like those early songs that are fully just Rodney songs, but that didn't leave a lot of room for Bunch. So, you know, that they kind of butted heads a bit there because John wanted, you know, obviously to have put his stamp on things. He wanted to write the lyrics and come up with the melodies. I mean, that's
Oh, I see. Rodney's doing that. Okay.
Yeah, so in the early years or through most of I mean, honestly, not like the early, most of the time, that was always kind of a thing, as those two would kind of butt heads a lot, you know, because Rodney had a vision and he had like a fully fleshed out piece of material, and John would like, I don't want to sing that, or I don't want to sing those melodies, I don't want to sing those words, it's not how I feel, you know, because Rodney and John wrote lyrics, couldn't be further from each other. I mean, Rodney wrote kind of intellectual lyrics, and John's were more like, you know, like feeling-based lyrics, you know.
Every time I listen to Sensefield now, I feel like I'm going to be able to figure out who wrote what now, just based on that information.
If there's space involved or anything like that, any sort of sci-fi theme, guarantee you that's Rodney's song.
So, well, was another interesting question is Rodney, I always felt, this is just like my personal take, I felt like he had a little bit of a Pixies sort of Frank Black vibe going on. Was he deeply influenced by them?
Yeah. The short answer, yes, very much so. Okay. So was I, but Rodney, I think it came through more in Rodney's songs. He definitely had. Rodney is a very creative person. He is all creativity. There's like none of that kind of, whichever it is, right brain. I can't remember right brain or left brain, but he's purely creative. And so he always had a kind of a skewed kind of take on music. And that's what kind of made his songs interesting. So his songs already kind of leaned that way, like the weird chord progressions and odd melodies and stuff. But yeah, he was a huge Pixies fan. I'm sure still is.
You can really hear that. I noticed it when I first heard Building, which, you know, I don't want to jump around too much. That was my introduction, and then I went backwards. But who are your favorite guitar players? I forgot to ask, you know, that really inspired your playing.
I mean, early on, it was people like Rick Agnew from like the Adolescents, that kind of stuff, like in the early days. Loved him. But then, like, I mean, when I discovered the Pixies too, I was super into Joey Santiago. I mean, was always trying to like rip off something or make something that sounded like something he would do.
Right.
I mean, Rodney and I had that in common. We both just loved that sound, and so that was a huge influence. We both also liked My Bloody Valentine a lot, like in the early '90s.
I could hear that lush kind of vibe from Bloody Valentine. Yeah,
that was a big influence as well. That kind of stuff, that kind of warped, kind of, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. On the self-titled and on Killed for Less, you can really hear that kind of shoegazy thing happening more so in those records.
Yeah, we were both totally into that too. We liked a lot of the same stuff, but we both approached songwriting differently. I was a little bit more meat and potatoes, and Rodney was a little bit more avant-garde.
Right. And then, so with self-titled, you ended up on Revelation Records, which is, well, Revelation was originally out here on the East Coast. At that point, I guess they were on the West Coast. But how did all that come together where, like, you're now making a record for Revelation?
Yeah, that kind of came out of left field because initially when we first started the band, we were just kind of drifting, like we didn't have any, we weren't tethered to anything. I mean, we were just kind of on our own world. Like we kind of weren't part of the punk scene anymore because we were doing something new and different. We didn't necessarily want to be. But I guess what happened is Jordan from Revelation, some of the people that worked with him had our first self-released EP, I believe. We had like a little 4 or 5 song CD EP that we put out ourselves. And I guess they had it and they all liked it and they kind of turned Jordan onto it. And then that's from my understanding, that's how he heard of us. And then he eventually, I think he came to some shows and then approached us at some point and asked if we wanted to put out, a record. At the time, it was like, oh God, how's that going to work? I mean, I knew what Revelation was. Revelation was, Youth of Today and it was, or East Coast hardcore, and then Sensefield, and we were just totally, we weren't that. That's for sure.
Well, Sensefield might have been the first band of that sort of like second wave of Revelation, which was more melodic. You have your Far Sides and your Texas the Reasons and Game Face and all that stuff. I felt like Sensefield might have been the first band to kind of like arrive to the Revelation imprint or the label that was like that.
Yeah. I think us, maybe Far Side, I can't remember the exact timing, but yeah, definitely one of the first. And it was a challenge too. I mean, when we would tour back in those old days, we would end up playing with hardcore bands because that's the circuit we would play on, and people didn't know what to make of us, and that's when they would call us. They called us emo, but it wasn't a compliment. That just meant we were like, wimpy or weak, or like it was like, oh, you're just some emo band. You're not hardcore. We played with bands like Snapcase and shit like that, and we actually played. We had on our very first tour for Sensefield, which was before I think we put anything out in Revelation. We played in Buffalo, New York, which is Snapcase's hometown. And actually some of the people like Garrett from Texas the Reason was an early Sensefield fan, and he's from Buffalo. I think he either helped put on the show, or anyways, that's when we first met him. They had us play with Snapcase. They put on a show. They had us headline over Snapcase, who were this huge hometown band that could draw people. And we were this unknown band that like nobody knew of, playing to like, dozens of people a night sometimes. And so we played a show with Snapcase, and knowing that they were like a huge band, we said, can we play before you? Just, throw us a bone here. Just like, let us go on before you. They're like, no, you got to go on after us. So we closed the show. As we're closing, like people are filing out by the hundreds, you know what I mean? Until it was like just that group of people that put us on, and we were left with that.
Oh my God!
So, yeah, that was brutal. But
the irony there is that they ended up becoming more of a post-hardcore band later on in their career.
Yeah, as did everybody else, I guess, eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
So Self-Titled comes out, and I'll kind of talk about Self-Titled and Killed for Less kind of in the same conversation, because I feel like they were around the same time period. But how quickly or not quickly did you feel the band started to catch on and build a fan base? Because I feel like by that time you were kind of becoming a household name.
Yeah, it's hard to, the Self-Titled, that's our first 2 self-released EPs and some odds and ends. That's kind of repackaging. And then our first proper record for Revelation was Killed for Less. Initially, the fans that we had were ex-Reason to Believe fans, things like that, were people, Revelation people that, were into it because we were on Revelation. It feels like it really didn't fully kind of take off until like around Building, is when it kind of, that's kind of when it got better. I don't know.
Yeah, well, because when I saw you on Building, it was sold out, but it was at Wetlands, and you were headlining.
Was that with Texas the Reason, or who was that with?
Yeah, I went to go see Texas the Reason, and I had heard your name and seen your name on, posters at friends' houses and things like that. and I decided to stick around. And I was like, holy shit, this is fucking amazing. Because at that point, if you were into Text the Reason, Sensefield wasn't so far off that like it was a great package. If you liked one,
Yeah,
band, you liked the other.
yeah, no, that was a good pairing. That worked. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember those shows. There were some really good shows on that tour. I think that was I don't know if that was the same tour we played in the blizzard in Manhattan. Was it?
It was in Manhattan, and it was winter. It was probably that show.
Yeah, because there was another show we played at like. Is there a place called Brownies or?
Oh yeah, Brownies.
And I remember that. It was like blizzard, like people standing outside in the blizzard. It was like so crazy that year. Yeah,
That's actually where Bad Brains recorded the Roar cassette tape, by the way, in that place.
At Brownies?
Yeah, because they lived there. It was
really?
It was a squat, and every person. This is just a side note, but it still exists, and Jesse Malin has pretty much like kept that place going to preserve that history. But that's where the Bad Brains lived, actually.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Pretty wild, but yeah, I remember that show, and I remember Pete like I think it was sold out, and people were singing along. So it was like, where have I been? And, how have I not heard Sensefield before? And there was a good crowd of people that all knew who you were. So.
Yeah, New York was always very kind to us. Those were always really good shows, and New York, that tri-state area there was always really good. And anytime we'd play like the little clubs around there, like Maxwell's and Hoboken and places like that, it was always really good, and people sang along, and
yeah.
those are great shows.
Building is obviously a significant record because it is what led to the major label interest, which I know was kind of a tough thing. But quickly, before we get into that, the songwriting and the layers on Building, man, I hope no one watching this or eventually watches this, because it's going to be archived, takes this the wrong way. I was on Revelation Records, so I know all those people, but Building sounded like a record that should have been on like Capitol Records. It was just unbelievable. Can you talk about, did Andy Wallace produce that?
Yeah, no, he didn't produce it, he mixed it. We actually recorded that. That record was a result of having done some touring. Like Killed for Less, that was all pre-touring, really. So we weren't out playing a lot. So once we started touring, the songs got a little quicker, and the things got a little bit, kind of got back to being a slightly more punk rock, and and so we had a batch of songs, and we recorded at a local studio, with the same guy who had recorded our Reason to Believe record. It was a guy that we worked with a lot. He was like a local guy so we recorded that. I think, Revelation funded that. We recorded it, but then we didn't do anything with it for a little bit. And it wasn't until we actually signed to a major. It was actually Richie from Into Another who. Is this thing still going?
I can hear you, but your face is actually completely frozen for some reason. Let's see.
Yeah, that's weird.
If you want, oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh yeah, Richard's
great.
He was on the show last week. Yeah.
Yeah, they were working. I think they were doing a record with Andy Wallace. Anyway, so he kind of hooked us up with Andy Wallace. Said, you should mix this band. Anyway, so we got him to mix it, which is super cool.
No, for anyone that's watching, Andy Wallace, I believe he did Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. I could be wrong.
Yeah, the one he was most noted for at that point was Nevermind, Nirvana.
Well, yeah, that of course. But yeah, was that a high budget record for you guys on Revelation?
No, super low budget.
Wow.
I mean, it was only a 16-track recording too. We recorded at a 16-track studio, so we didn't. That's all there was. We didn't have this is pre-Pro Tools era, pre any of that. So that was just a 16-track tape. And it would probably only cost like a few $1,000s to record it. The mixing was more, but he did it like at a very reduced rate, kind of as a favor.
Yeah. goes to show, knowing. Oh, no worries. Yeah, just like I guess like having friends in the right places where it can kind of lead you to, right? That record,
Yeah.
that was the best sounding record for an underground band that I had ever heard at that point. And like the, I'm a musician, of course, so I'm going to notice these things, but like not just the layers, but like, oh, sounds like there's a different snare drum on this song, or I tuned it different. Like I noticed like all these intricacies when you were finished making that record. Um, and be honest, I mean, I guess it's a little easier to not have to be so modest when it's a band that's been broken up for a while. But was your mind blown when you fucking heard the final mix? Were you like, wow, this is nuts?
Uh, I yeah. When we heard the mixes, like proper mixes done by like a total professional. Yeah, it was cool because we went to New York to do it. We stayed, we stayed in New York for like a week or so, and and listened to, he wouldn't let us sit in the room when he was mixing, but he would let us come in when the mixes were done. It was just, yeah, we were just super excited, to like have like a legit, like world-renowned guy working on one of our records, especially this, because we knew like it was recorded by, like a local like character in El Segundo, California, on a 16-track record. I mean, it was so low budget. It was like, God, I can't believe Andy Wallace is going to mix this thing.
We got. I hate when this happens because the show goes by so quickly, and I have still like 15 more questions to ask you. So we'll try to get through it. But Norm from Text the Reason was on my show recently, and I know all those guys. Garrett, he told me a really funny story which I wanted to get through before we move into the Warner Brothers thing. But he told, you guys became friends, of course, lifelong friends. He had told us a story about how on the first day of tour, you guys were a bit standoffish, and the first few days it was kind of like that. And they were in the van, and Norm was like, you know what? I'm going to talk to those guys tomorrow, and we're going to trade members and take one guy from the band and make him travel with us, and we'll. Is that accurate?
That sounds vaguely familiar. I kind of remember that. Yeah, we were weird. Like, I mean, honestly, like when I think back, we were so insular as a band, like such a weird, like, yeah, we were just oddballs. I just like the older I get, the more I realize like how just completely like clueless sometimes we were, and just completely in our own little bubble. Yeah, we eventually did. We got to know them well, and we had a good time with them. There was some rocky moments on that tour, but overall it was a lot of fun.
I just love that story. I told him I was going to steal that next time I'm with a band that like we have to break the ice with. But the way he told it, now that I'm remembering, is he told me he walked into your dressing room or somewhere, and he sat you guys down. He's like, we're on tour together. We're going to be friends. We're going to get to know each other, and we're taking you with us. And I think he said John was the first guy that they took, and it worked, and everyone became buddies.
Yeah, that does sound familiar. Yeah, touring's weird. Eventually you got to break the ice, go out and drink or do something. They didn't do much of that, so but eventually we did. Yeah, we did become tight.
Love that. The Warner Brothers deal, if we could try to sum that up, kind of a weird situation. From an outsider's perspective, as a fan, I heard rumors of what was going on at the time, and maybe you could dispel some of that, but this is like all the hearsay amongst people that were kind of fans, was that you guys got signed, you made the record Tonight and Forever, and then I think there was a subsidiary that folded. Is that what happened? And then you had to eventually try to regain the rights to it, but you re-recorded it?
Well, yes and no. Not really. We signed with Warner like the end of '95, and the deal was that they would put out Building at some point. It was Revelation's record, but they were going to like co-release it with them, which they did. But they never really felt ownership of that record, so they just kind of let it just kind of go and go away. And so we did a ton of touring on it in that whole '96 time period. Once that was over, we came back and started working on songs for the actual record. That went on for like way too long. Like we wrote songs for like a year. We recorded for like another couple of years. It just dragged on
Wow.
and on and on. And some of that was our fault, and some of that was the fault of the people we worked with. We worked with a producer who was rarely ever available, and so weeks would go by. We would just get like a day here, a day there. Anyways, it dragged on forever, way too long. The world was going on, and we're sitting at home just spinning our wheels, trying to get a record done. It was really, really frustrating. Like, I mean, it frustrated me to tears some days because we just couldn't make headway. And as this is going on, I mean, at a major label, there's constant turmoil. And at Warner Brothers at that time, there was constant turmoil. There was upheavals in management and staff. And, I don't know how many different heads of the label came and went in that time period. So we finished it, for better or for worse. And then, we were working on packaging and doing all that stuff and trying to get a release date. It kept getting pushed back and get pushed back. And then finally a new guy came in, and decided to get rid of a lot of the old roster. And we were one of those bands.
God damn.
So, yeah. So we were on the label for probably a good 4 years,
I didn't know that you were recording for years, which is wild.
Yeah, we had like a little studio of our own, like a rehearsal / studio in El Segundo, California, and we would do all our demos there and stuff like that. And then we started recording the record there, working with a guy. And it was going okay. I wasn't loving what we were getting, but the problem is it just dragged on forever. I mean, it just that's a life lesson. You got to get in, get it done, and get on with it. And we just didn't do that. We just sat on it forever, and finally we just kind of we dodged a lot of bullets, but eventually one caught us. So
I can totally relate to that, man. And I don't want to derail you too much, but I'll just say quickly. A couple things I can relate to you on is that not only was I on Revelation, but we took forever to write and record the record that we were supposed to put out with them, and a lot of bands that we played with were getting famous around us, and just fucking flying by. Take Back Sunday, Brand New, Thursday, this whole thing, and they were open up for us at one point, and we got left in the dust. And not to get dark, but we'll go there. My singer passed away also. I can actually relate to much of the experiences that you had, just maybe like at a different time period. And we were talking to majors and all that stuff, But
that's pretty much. I mean, that's a lot of what happened. I mean, in that time period, like Jimmy Eat World was blowing up and all this stuff was going on, and we're still spinning our wheels, sitting at home, like just. That was a real interesting thing because we took Jimmy Eat World out on one of their first tours as like playing with us, and then by the time we got around to finishing that record, we were saying, "Hey, can we open for you?"
Right.
And so we went out and opened for them. That was a lot of fun, but exact same thing. Yeah, like the world was going on, and we were just,
Music is a tough thing, man. But once you sort of kind of get back to the essence of it, I think it still remains to be such an essential, beautiful thing. It's all that stuff that really can kind of interrupt it. But so the record that eventually came out, Tonight and Forever, was that a re-recording or was that the same recording?
It was re-recorded, reimagined versions of a lot of the same songs, because that record got shelved, and there'd been so many changes at the label. We just figured, screw it, we'll just re-record some of these songs. Like they're probably not going to even know or care anyways. So we went to go do that. Bunch, on the other hand, he was so kind of like got so emotionally invested in that original recording, he just couldn't stomach the idea of redoing all that shit over again, all the same lyrics. So the only way that he could get excited about it was to rewrite the lyrics, rewrite the melodies. So we took some of those same songs and he reimagined them vocally, and then we had to re-record them, and we had to do that all on our own, kind of at our own little studio.
Wow. I mean, it came out fucking amazing. It really did.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, like the finished product. I mean, "Save Yourself" is your biggest song that everyone. That's the most popular song, and that was, I wasn't even in the band. I'm just a fan, but like it was. I hope this doesn't come off wrong. It was painful to sort of witness in a way, because I'm just like, God, this band should be as big, if not bigger, than like some of these fucking bands. Like it's ridiculous. The video was great, but I know there's politics and business stuff that go on behind the scenes. How did you feel about the finished product and how it was received by the fans?
I think we were pretty proud of it at the time, and I haven't heard it in a long time, so I wonder if I would still feel that way. But I mean, I think it turned out pretty well, all things considered. I mean, we had Ken Andrews, A Failure.
Oh yeah, he's great.
He mixed that and a couple other songs. That's all we could afford at the time. Had to mix like 3 songs.
It's not a bad thing to afford.
Yeah. The rest of it we had to do on our own. We mixed ourselves. But yeah, it's just ironic that ended up being our biggest song. And we had that song when we did the Warner record, but the version we actually recorded that for Warner Brothers, but it was like, it wasn't the same. It didn't have the same feel. It was kind of a little more plodding, the way the rhythm was and stuff, and kind of came to life once we kind of reimagined it.
It's a flawless song. I mean, that whole record. Actually, I mean, if I'm going to be blunt, all of the stuff that you guys did to me was flawless, but that record was next level. And I love how it was mixed. The drums were really interesting, the way that it sounded on that record compared to your other records too. Just like the overall production of it. Now, so you went on to put out a couple more records, Living Outside, and then so what led to the breakup?
Yeah, we did one more record. That was kind of a painful record to make. John was kind of going through some stuff and wasn't really in a happy place for a while. He was going through some painful stuff. But we felt like we had to do something. It was because Save Yourself had done a lot more than any, it was our first radio song and all that stuff. It would have been crazy not to try to follow it up with something. So we did that. It was a little painful doing that record. But by that time, I think we just all felt like, or at least John and I felt like maybe it had played itself out, that it was kind of time to, Rodney wasn't actively playing with us anymore. He had a real tragedy with his daughter.
Oh, geez, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was heartbreaking, and he was sort of there, but not, I mean, he was, he would try to, he would contribute some stuff, but he wasn't like an active member.
A lot of pressure on you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then our drummer lived on the East Coast, and so it was really hard to kind of do stuff. So it was kind of a lot of trying to do stuff in the studio, and we didn't have the luxury of like playing together and touring the songs. So
yeah,
it just felt like it was time. You just kind of know when it's just like, I think this is done. I mean, this is,
just like anything.
Yeah, it just didn't, it didn't feel like the same thing anymore. Like we had a pretty consistent lineup, and then people started kind of falling by the wayside, and it was just, just didn't have the same vibrancy it had in the early days.
I'm going to try to breeze through this next 10 minutes because I still have a lot of questions for you. And so I just wanted to tell you that so you don't feel like I'm kind of interjecting. The Instagram kicks you off once you reached an hour, which is fucking annoying. So, when was it? Was that a final breakup, or was there a point when John was still around when you guys were ever talking about getting the band back together? Because maybe you could talk about To End the Letter too, like how, because I don't really know the story behind that.
That's the Japanese thing.
It's on Spotify, and it has a bunch of it has a bunch of songs.
Yeah, it's like a Pink. It's a Pink record.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually, after we broke up at the end of 2003, and that was it. But we had an opportunity to tour Japan. Our good friend Jeremy from Pennsylvania. Put a little tour together.
Looks like we lost John there. Let's, Chris. Let's see if we can get him back on. I think that he probably had some internet issues. But sorry I didn't get to any of your questions, and thank you for watching. This is super interesting. Just hang tight, guys. This happens sometimes. It's just the internet. So give him a second here. I'm sure he just got booted off, and he'll be right back. Worst comes to worst, what I'll do is restart the episode so we have a little bit more time since we're losing a little bit of, yes, thank you. I see your thumbs up. Let's get him back on, and then we'll decide what we want to do here. But what I'm thinking is I'm going to have him come back on and then restart the show so we could just get a little more time since we have some more questions. But while we're waiting for him to rejoin, I'm just going to mention that I actually had some correspondence with Jonathan Bunch from Sensefield towards the end of his life. I was a fan. We became friends on Facebook, and we exchanged some really nice messages. The guy was very humble and just sweet. So it's very sad to hear when he was when he was no longer with us. I never got the chance to meet him in person, and really glad to have had that memory though of just being able to know that I exchanged some cool messages with him before he had passed. Let's see what's going on here. I don't know if he is back. Let's see. No, we're gonna hang tight here, and hopefully we'll get this sorted out. In the meantime, oh, there we go. He's back. Okay. All right, let's give him a second here. Hey.
Sorry, my phone died.
No worries. That happens, man. You know, I have an idea. If we get kicked off again, maybe we could start over and just do a quick part 2 so we could get through a couple more questions, if that's cool with you.
Yep, no problem.
All right, because we're going to get kicked off in 8 minutes. But so what were we talking about? We were just talking about.
You're asking about that 2 in a letter thing.
Yeah, and the band breaking up in 2003 for good. We're kind of wrapping all that up together.
Yeah, so we did that final little jaunt in Japan in 2004. And we had to release something for the Japanese market in order to kind of make that tour happen. So that's what 2 in a letter was, demos and odds and ends and unreleased songs and just random stuff we had laying around that never kind of got recorded properly or made it on a record. So that's what that is. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think that actually has some of the, either all or some of the album that we recorded for Warner Brothers.
Okay, and it's got a different version of Sage on there, which I know is on the first 2 records also. Great song.
Yeah, that was another one of those brilliant record label suggestions, is that hey, you should re-record that song that people liked from your first record.
I love that.
And being idiots, we're like, okay, we'll do it. So we did it.
So the breakup was final. There was no point where you discussed getting back together prior to John's passing.
No, the next time that we all got in the same room again and did something was when we did that Revelation anniversary thing. That was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first time we all got back together, and we got Scott involved again. Scott, our original drummer, got the original line. Except for that show, John Stockberg, our bass player, wasn't involved for some reason. I don't remember why. But he was. Oh, I think he was down in Peru becoming a shaman, which is what he is now. Wow,
how did that feel doing that reunion show?
That was actually a lot of fun. That was a positive experience. Everybody had a lot of fun, and it was really cool to get back and do that again. And we had a few practices, and it started kind of coming back.
Dude, that's crazy. I mean, not to get derailed, but the last time that I played with my singer who passed was at that Revelation anniversary, but in New York, the East Coast. version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get to do that one. That would have been cool.
Um, I was just telling a quick story about how I became friends with John on Facebook. And he had followed me and commented on stuff and vice versa. And sadly, I never got to meet him in person when I was out on tour in LA. But I have messages exchanged, and he was such a nice guy and came off so humble for a complete stranger, for him to talk to me at all, online several times. I just thought that was really cool. What's your favorite thing about John that you missed the most?
John could be, yeah, he was like that though. I mean, he was just like he loved people. I mean, he really did. I mean, like sincerely. He was the kind of guy who would strike up a conversation with anybody. Sometimes you couldn't get where you were going because John would just start like talking to some random person.
Yeah.
He's just like that. He could be John could be kind of wacky and a lot of fun when he wanted to be. We had some good laughs together. We were pretty tight for years. It was just kind of me and him against the world there for like years. And then, so I miss that, the camaraderie.
You could just kind of tell, that his nature was that way, without even really knowing him. You can kind of get that sense. Jeff from Game Face, I believe, was the guest on our show that told an amazing story about John, where he called Revelation Records and John happened to be there and he answered the phone. And Jeff couldn't believe that one of his favorite singers that he looked up to was the guy answering the phone, and he gave him some like advice. I can't remember what it was, but he gave him some kind of valuable advice that he sort of like cherished and kept with him. So everything I've ever heard about him is an amazing thing, which is all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a people person. He was like polar opposite of me. I'm like more insular and stuff, but John was super outgoing, just was friends with like he must have had thousands of friends. He was just that kind of guy.
I guess we can kind of get through this before we get kicked off. My last questions are, you did the tribute shows. What were some of your favorite moments of that? I love watching that because of the collection of people from Walter to Garrett to Chaka. It's like the whole Revelation family got together. Ari from Lifetime. What were your favorite moments from that? And then consequently, are you still playing music? And is there anything we should be paying attention to now?
Yeah, from the tribute show, I mean, my favorite moment of that, I think, was we did this old song of ours called Dreams, which is like on our very, atypical song for us, but it was something that I had written early on. And we didn't ever play that song live just because it was like, oh, we're not going to play this. And we're trying to, playing live, you always want to like play the upbeat songs and blah, blah, blah. That's what we always did. So, but that was kind of a fan favorite, and that Garrett from Texas wanted to sing that one. And, so I really enjoyed that. I think he did an amazing job with it.
He killed it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that felt kind of special. I think that kind of made me a little misty when we played that one. And no, I'm not really playing much in the way of music lately, or at least I haven't in a while.
Well, I mean, we put out a lot of music that I said is timeless, that me and many people commenting and reading their comments throughout our conversation, and just people I know personally. Obviously, you saw from the shows and the attendance that you wrote music that means a lot to so many people. We got a minute left that's kind of coming down, so I'm happy we got through that, and I want to thank you for doing this. And the last comment we got here, I should share, said this guy had a drink with John at the Troubadour. He's a complete stranger, and he wrote a paper about the song Leia.
Yeah,
awesome. But I got 30 seconds and counting. But thank you so much. This is amazing.
Well, thank you. That was fun. Sorry, my phone died.
It's all right. I'm sure we're going to be hanging out in person since your wife is my publicist and all. So we'll be hopefully crossing paths.
All right. Thank you again.
Stay safe out there, and if you ever decide to play music again, give me a call. You got a drummer waiting for you over here.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Take care, Chris.
You too.
Bye. That was amazing. Everybody Sensefield, one of the best bands out there. Timeless music. Stay safe and join us again tomorrow and the day after. Thanks for supporting Age of Quarantine. Peace out.